Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Cedar Canyon Trail. We are headed down on a 9-mile hike today. Pretty decent elevation gain, almost 2,500 feet of elevation gain. We're going to see lots of waterfalls, but we are leaving right at sunrise because it is supposed to rain a lot later. So we're hoping to get most of the hike in before we get really drenched. And if you look right here, check this out. There's a buck in the woods right over there. Can you see it over my shoulder? Back in the woods there. I can't make the screen any bigger. But we'll see what we can find on this hike. See you in a bit. Okay, folks. So right now we are hiking down the Cedar Run Trail. And I want you to look at the topography. Look at the shape of the land behind me. So on one side, it goes up. Then on this side over here, we've got a dry creek bed where water sometimes runs, and you can see behind that there's another big hill. So we're in a valley. What is it about this valley that caused it to form, do you think? So take a look at those different features that we talked about. There's this creek bed in the middle and two hills on the side. So probably what happened is that as the creek ran, it cut deeper and deeper, taking sediment away and causing erosion. Until you had this valley that was formed between these two hills on either side. And now the hiking trail follows this right down next to the creek, right down into the larger valley where this creek is probably going to run into a bigger creek down the bottom. So that's one of the ways that valleys form, is through erosion from streams and creeks and rivers and that kind of thing. Okay, here's a little bit better view of what I was talking about. If you look down there, you can see the creek, and you can see how it's kind of carved out its way between the two sides of two different hills, right? And every day, it's getting just a little bit deeper as it takes more and more sediment out of the riverbed and washes it down the creek. And it's getting just deeper and deeper and deeper, and eventually this will be an even deeper canyon than it is right now. That's how erosion works. Okay, so I'm taking a little break. We've got about a mile so far. We're next to this beautiful stream. It's blocked by some foliage, so you can't see it. You may be able to see the waterfall over my shoulder. But I want to get back to that buck that we saw at the beginning of the hike. So deer, white-tailed deer, are herbivores. They like to eat plants. They only eat plants. And one of the cool things is you can tell an herbivore by looking at the shape of its teeth. So deer, like other herbivores, will have really flat teeth from grinding up the plants that they eat. But my question is, what else do you think lives in the same area? So deer like to eat lots of the plants and stuff that are around. Does anything eat the deer? Are there any other animals that eat the same kinds of things that deer do? Any other herbivores that are living there? So what I'm really asking you is about the food chain, right? So we know all around us is this green stuff, right? Those are the producers. Plants can take sunlight and turn it into energy for themselves. Most producers are plants or use photosynthesis, sometimes algae, some other kinds of organisms. But most producers do photosynthesis. Most are green, and they use sunlight to make their energy. There's a couple of organisms under the sea, and I have to look down because I'm on a rocky trail right now. But there's a couple of organisms under the sea, near like deep sea vents, that use chemicals. That's called chemosynthesis. But all of those producers can produce their own energy. They take either sunlight or chemicals and make energy for themselves. And then consumers are the organisms that eat the producers. So your white-tailed deer is a consumer. It eats plants, right? It eats the producers. So it consumes them. Consume is another word for eat. Now, there's also other consumers that consume animals, right? So they're meat eaters. Omnivores that eat plants and animals, like bear, like black bear that live around here. Or just carnivores that just eat meat, like coyote, animals like that only eat meat. So my question for you, back to the original question, is we know the buck was there eating its plants. What other animals do you think we can find around here in Shenandoah National Park in Virginia? Have you thought of any animals, by the way? I've got some animals that I bet you haven't thought of. And I'm going to give you a little hint. Animals, so we know scientists classify animals. They classify everything, right? We classify rocks. But animals are really put into two broad categories. Vertebrates, those are animals that have a backbone. So there's 5 different categories of vertebrates: birds, fish, mammals, amphibians, and reptiles. And invertebrates, so So those are animals that don't have a spine and don't have a spinal cord. 90% of animals on Earth are invertebrates. But I'm betting that most of the animals that you thought of are probably vertebrates, probably have a spine, probably fall into those 5 categories. So before I show you some animals that I come across, start thinking about some invertebrates. What kind of non-spine animals, animals that don't have a spine, do you think I'm gonna come across on this hike on a wet day near a creek in a canyon? Write down some guesses and we'll come back. I'm sure I can find something cool for you. Okay, we're gonna stop and take a little break right here. But I wanna show you this, look at this. It's a swimming hole. It's actually probably about 5 or 6 feet deep, right in there in the center. And that's carved out like we talked about the erosion. As the water goes, it takes all this sand and these small rocks and it washes them down the stream. And sometimes it'll carve out these kind of gorges under the water. And that's a great place to put your feet in or take a dunk and go swimming. But just be really careful because sometimes these swimming holes are on top of waterfalls and you don't want to get washed over the edge. This one's pretty safe though, so we're gonna take a break here. Okay folks, I'm gonna yell because it is pretty loud here next to this really awesome waterfall. Check that out. It almost looks like a natural slide where if you start at the top, you could slide right down on your behind, right into that pool that's at the base. But that's not the reason why I stopped here. I asked you to think about some invertebrates that we might see. And down here on the rocks, I'm gonna change the camera for a second, hold on. There are those little guys crawling all over the place. So it looks like there's some kind of centipede or millipede. Now, here's my question for you. Anytime you're in an ecosystem is all of the plants and animals and all of the natural things that are living together and interacting with each other. Anytime you're in an ecosystem and you find an organism, you can ask yourself, what eats this organism? And what does this organism eat? And that's how you can start to build a food chain or a food web. So in this case, you've got these little millipedes or centipedes running around. And I'll bet you that there's kinds of birds and snakes and other things like that that eat them. And what eats snakes? So let's say snakes eat these millipedes. What eats snakes? Well, birds, hawks, right? And I can tell you that on our hikes the last couple of days, I've seen snakes that probably eat these guys, and I've seen hawks flying around. They're all part of the food chain and the food web in Shenandoah National Park. They're all part of the ecosystem here. So what other kinds of invertebrates and vertebrates can you find in your backyard? So as I pause here for a second, I'm guessing or thinking that I might have misidentified those creepy crawly things that were on the rock back there. It's very possible they could have been caterpillars, but I'm not all that knowledgeable about creepy crawly things. If you know better than I do, or you've done some research and you can identify them, let me know. What do you think that blue mark on the tree means? Well, when you're on a hike, these kind of blazes, they're called, on trees or on rocks, tell you where the path is, where the trail is that you're on. When you see 2 blazes, when you see a double blaze, it tells you that either the trail turns or that there's an intersection. So before, I almost got lost because I went down the wrong path. But when I noticed that there was no blue blazes, I knew that I was on the wrong trail. And then I worked my way back up. So this is a way that you can keep from getting lost when you're hiking. Okay, folks, we are not even halfway done with the hike, but we are down at the bottom point of the hike. So we started at 3,405 feet above sea level, 3,405. And we are now at 949 feet above sea level. So we've dropped quite a bit. And now we've got to hike back up. So first question, pause the video or stop here and do some math. How many feet have we dropped? So 3,405 minus 949 gives us, let's see, 5156, 2456, I think I have. I'm doing that in my head. You have paper and pencil, so you probably do a better job. But 2456. So That is the equivalent of about a 240-story building, which doesn't exist because the tallest building in the world is the Burj Khalifa. And I've been to the top of that, and I believe it has 149 stories. I might be wrong. Might have a little more than that. So, what we have to do now is the equivalent of climbing the steps to the top of the Burj Khalifa. My legs are going to be tired later, but we got some exploring to do. So, see you in a bit. Okay, everyone, we're about halfway up. Right now, we're at 2263 elevation above sea level. We started at the top at 3,405 feet above sea level, and we hiked down to 949 feet above sea level. So my question for you right now is, how much further do we have to hike up? How many feet do we have to hike to get back to where we started at 3,405? So the reason why I stopped here, though, is because of this cool cave. It goes way back under in there, and I'm betting that there's probably some animals that make that their shelter. What kind of animals do you think might live in a cave like that? Okay, everyone, this is the last epic view on the hike. You can see this waterfall, and if you look down, let me see if I can show you the pool down below. After this, it's just nothing but fire road for the last 2.5 miles, and not much to see. So this is my time to bid you adieu. Thank you for coming along on this awesome hike with me. I'm exhausted. You didn't have to do any work, so go out in your backyard and do some jumping jacks or something, get some exercise today. But this has been pretty cool. Hope you enjoyed it almost as much as I did. Stay curious, keep asking questions, keep exploring. I'll see you again soon.